the biggest difficulty in the whole recording process is transmitting the emotions that when you're sitting in a hall like this, which is, you know, one of the world's greatest. You're sitting in this hall and you're listening to music being played by great musicians, and you just have a direct contact to the musicians. You see them, the sound, and it's an experience that's probably unforgettable for most people for the first time they're in this hall, or even maybe if they've been here 100 times. And when you're recording, the difficulty is trying to capture that emotion, that experience that the people have, and putting it onto a medium that they can live and bring home with them and listen to at home. In a completely different environment where you don't have the visual aspect, you just simply have the pure audio sound. And that creates different philosophies in the recording process. There's some people who think you need to come in and you put up 2 microphones and you capture the sound as it was in the hall. And it's a legitimate way of approaching the problem, but we at Deutsche Grammophon and many other companies too try to find a balance between the balance that the conductor and the orchestra makes on stage, what's in the score, and maybe try to even out some of the discrepancies between what's in the score, what's happening in the hall, and maybe also what the conductor is trying to do. Because not everything the conductor is trying to do on the stage is successfully being transmitted into the hall. The emotions, yes, but certain aspects of the balance are being lost. That can be because the scores are written for different instruments. In other words, maybe now everyone is playing a modern instrument and it creates a different balance within the orchestra as when the piece was written, or simply performance practices have changed and created different possibilities in the orchestra. So we try to put up as many microphones as necessary, but as few as we can actually need. So it's a question of how many do you need, and that's how you proceed. You don't sort of say, well, we're going to put up 1,000 microphones just for the sake of it. We try to put them up just to have them there, but in the end we try to use as few of them as possible. At the same time, what gives us or leads us through that is are the comments, the relationship we have with the conductor or the musician. So if the musician, conductor has a very specific ideas about things, it's great to be in a dialogue with the person to understand what they're after, where things maybe are not working on stage for him, or when he's listening to the recording, what things he thinks could be brought out, which maybe even didn't work so well in the hall. So that's our goal, is to have the possibility to almost interpret the score with the conductor's intention, and at the same time trying to capture as much of the emotional content as is possible. One of the problems about the difference between the concert hall experience, apart from the pure emotional one, is that when you're looking at an orchestra, if let's say a harp is playing, and you're looking at the harp and you're seeing the motion, the ear is an amazing technical piece of equipment, and it's possible for the ear to zoom in on this sound that's coming from the harp, and you can hear it. If you didn't have the visual aspect, you probably wouldn't hear it. So it's some of these things which we try to enhance, or I mean, my colleagues, we're all trying basically for the same results, I think. But it's that process. You're trying to add. If you think of it as a photographer, or it's adding light strategically to a scene, so that you're highlighting things that otherwise get lost in the shadows.
music scores as a director. You are able to read music as a musician. You need to read for.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I did. I had a long, very colorful educational process, which I profited from amazingly in my job now. But I had various sort of things I studied, amongst other composition and piano and things. So I have a varied background as a musician, and then did a course in Germany called Tonmeister course, which is a similar. You have a technical side to it, but you also have the same kinds of musical subjects that the conductors have. So it's a kind of a bridge between the technical side and the conductor or musician side, so that it gives us also maybe a common language to try to communicate with these people with.
And how much long do you, let's say, do you speak with Claudio for one recording?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm in a really privileged position. Like sometimes I think I'm the luckiest guy in the world, because not only do I work for a great company, but because of that, I have possibility of working with the world's finest musicians, and amongst them is Claudio Abbado, and he, in his generous way, has given me the opportunity of meeting with him on various occasions. I mean, we've worked together now on and off for over 20 years. So back when he first began in Berlin, in fact. So, and over the years, you get to know the people. I can never second guess him completely, because his imagination is so extraordinary, and he's always has a new view and way of looking at a specific problem that he's trying to solve. So that keeps us all on our toes. You can't sort of, it's never routine. But I hope over the years I've found a way to imagine while we're doing the recording what he's going to ask for afterwards, or even during. Now, during these sessions, we spend times in the morning listening to the performance of the evening before, going through it, discussing changes in the balance, changes in small details of the phrasing and things like that that's important for him. And those moments, of course, bring me even closer to his goal. What is he looking for? And hopefully I can use that information and that knowledge to, when we're doing the mixing and the editing, to try to realize those wishes and make them happen for him.
Now, after all these years of work together, there is still a great enthusiasm between you and Claudio.
I think anyone who has the chance to work so closely with him, the enthusiasm comes from him. He exudes enthusiasm and warmth as a person, and I think that's what, when you look at the orchestra, it's all top musicians from Europe who put down their work in wherever they are and come to play for him. And okay, every person brings their own exuberance and enthusiasm, but the primary enthusiasm is coming from him and his vision of music, and that's every time fresh. And so it's a bit like a drug, I guess. You know, you keep coming back if you have the chance. And
so you speak about vision. So, to your way of thinking, which is Abbado's vision of the music?
Okay, that's a. Claudio is someone who has I mean, he's not easily definable. Because you have, on the one hand, you have a musician who is absolutely intent on, let's say, truth to what he thinks were the composer's intentions, and the score is the basis of his whole conception, and he's trying to understand what the composer was after, and communicate that to the musicians. So you have this sort of, I won't call it musicological, but this kind of, you know, historical interest in what is there, what's on the page. But that's then at the far extreme from when you see him in the concert situation and when he then actually makes the music. It's the performance and the emotion is there, and the details in that moment don't seem to him to be important. Of course, they are after when he's listening, and he wants those musicians to be doing all those details that he's asked for. But in the moment of the performance, it's the performance that takes the most important role, and not the picky stuff. So I mean, and that's sort of the two sides of him, because he has the picky, exact, detailed side, which of course for us is challenging, because sometimes, you know, oh, I would like to hear more second violins here, and so we try to make that happen and things. But it's his, that's somehow after the big music making happens. The music making, so he has the phase where he's studying the score and creating what he thinks he wants, the performances, and then afterwards sort of a reanalysis of how did we do and how can we still improve it to get what I wanted, what my original vision was. So it's an exciting and challenging cooperation.
Did you notice that he is changing his musical idea in the years over, let's say, Beethoven Symphony, or we were with him together in Venezuela, and he made the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven, and the musicians has studied his recording with Berliner, and then they were there, and he made a totally different Ninth of Beethoven. So, what do you think about this changing idea over the years on a score or something like that?
Well, I think it's. He doesn't, I think, Claudio doesn't approach music as something which is fixed and static, and even if he's looking for the intention of the composer, maybe he doesn't feel he's always found it, and will always be reassessing what is there, and it's never a routine. It's never, if he wants to perform a piece again in concert, it's not for the sake just of redoing something and marking on the score again another performance. So that it's more of, let's look at it again and maybe discover new things in it. I think that's his way of approaching music. He's not content to redo something the way he's done it. Music is probably just simply too subjective and too vast to sort of say, okay, now I've got the way Beethoven 9 is supposed to be. Interesting sideline, we were at Deutsche Grammophon, we brought out a series of the complete symphonies with the Beethoven symphonies with Berlin, and then about 5 or 6 years ago, he approached us and thought it would be nice if we could re-look at those, not re-record them. But he had recorded them again for video a year or two later, and felt that performance was more what he was after, those performances. But they were connected with video, so there was a few compromises that had been made just because of the pictures you had. You know, they didn't have as much material to choose from, and so we went back together, and that was a fantastic period of my life. I spent, I think, 3 weeks in his home in Sardinia, and we worked together every day, choosing between the takes of the old version and the new version, or seeing, we couldn't really mix them, but to find out which were the best performances, and in the end ended up editing completely new from the newer material, and that shows, even within a few years, how his interpretation or his vision of a piece can change quite radically. It had mainly to do with tempi. That, you know, he found then obviously that at a certain point for himself, at that moment, he'd found a better tempo that seemed to work for the music as the way he saw it. So it was a...
Choosing from all the recordings you produced, you made with Maestro Abbado, is there a, let's say, a little story you can tell us between you and him? Something nicht zum Lachen, aber...
Oh, that's a more difficult question. I don't know.
Oder eine sehr schöne Erinnerung. Oder?
Yeah, I mean this period, I think this time in that I spent with him in Sardinia, whenever I would go to listen, I went there on several occasions with some of the recordings we had made in Bologna with Orchestra Mozart and the Pergolesi, and would go there to listen with him, and you know, he's so warm and generous, and he literally invites you into his home and shares his thoughts with you, and that's what stays with you. That's what you that makes me feel so privileged. You know, you have this contact to someone who treats you and your ideas and your comments on the same level as, let's say, his own, and will consider them and say, oh, maybe, or no, I don't think so. I think, you know, he's so open and so willing to listen to what people say, and this is with his grandeur and his status as a musician and his status as a musician, it's quite remarkable, and makes him, I think, just in the eyes of the people who have the chance to know him so well, just a wonderful person.
Last one, the most difficult request of Claudio.
That most difficult request usually has to do with bells. I think I haven't recorded anything myself that had needed bells for a while, but I've been involved in several projects when we did Boris Godunov in Berlin, for example, and this was quite a challenge to find recordings or bells that could be used for the sound he was imagining. That was a big challenge. I don't know if we lived up to it, but we did our best.